But today, just 8 months into my administration, we are the hottest country anywhere in the world, and there is no other country even close. America is blessed with the strongest economy, the strongest borders, the strongest military, the strongest friendships, and the strongest spirit of any nation on the face of the earth. This is indeed the golden age of America. We are rapidly reversing the economic calamity we inherited from the previous administration, including ruinous price increases and record-setting inflation like we've never had before. Under my leadership, energy costs are down, gasoline prices are down, grocery prices are down, mortgage rates are down, and inflation has been defeated. The only thing that's up is the stock market, which just hit a record high. In fact, it hit a record high 48 times in the last short period of time.
Now, Trump, do you really think we believe you when it comes to grocery prices and our utility bills? Unemployment rate, 4.3%, going up. Payroll revisions for the last 12 months through March 2025, minus 911,000 jobs. That's almost a million. Initial job loss claims, 231,000 for the week ending on September 13th, 2025. Consumer confidence is plummeting too. Wow, 55.4%. Wow. And look at this. Consumer credit expansion is up to $16 billion right now. Inflation, 2.9%. And the cost of housing, look at this. The average house starts at $1.3 million. And we don't even want to talk about our trade deficit, which is at 78.3 billion. Wow, as of July. Basically, we're heading towards a 1929 style depression, one like we've never seen before. And guess why? The main reason is because Donald Trump and his ridiculous tariffs that he knows are destroying the United States of America right now and putting a lot of his supporters out of business and even worse, making them unemployed. So Melania, the only question I have, and I have to say, that was an incredible acting job, but how did you keep a straight face the whole time he was sitting up there spewing those lies? It's incredible work, but I guess someone has to do it.
Trump has instituted a 5-step economic plan to sabotage the economy. This is an in-depth, for TikTok, analysis, so settle in for a few minutes. So what he's doing: shrinking the labor force, cutting off international trade, destabilizing the financial system, weakening core institutions, and consolidating wealth and power. So step 1, shrinking the labor force. Trump is deliberately creating worker shortages, removing millions of undocumented workers from farms, construction sites, hotels, and restaurants. Undocumented workers make up roughly half, yes, half of agricultural workers. And Trump knows this and what it will do to the food supply. Food is rotting in the fields with no one to harvest the crops. Housing construction has stalled, raising prices nationwide. Hospitality and tourism sectors face record staffing crisis. The result? Food shortages, higher prices, supply chain disruption. Now he's attacking legal immigration. The $100,000 H-1B visa fee makes it nearly impossible for tech companies to hire skilled workers. Tech will move to India, Canada, and Europe, leaving the US behind. Restricting student visas cuts off a future talent pipeline in medicine, science, and engineering. The goal: make the US businesses struggle to operate, forcing closures and driving up consumer prices. Number 2, cut off international trade. Trump's trade policies isolate America from the global markets, hurting exports and consumers at the same time. Tariffs on imports raise everyday prices for goods. Retaliatory tariffs by other nations then block US exports, which have devastating effects on farmers and manufacturers. Pulling out of agreements like the TPP and threatening NAFTA partners pushes allies towards China's RCEP, the EU, MESCOR, and all other non-US trading blocs, leaving the US isolated. Allies like Japan, South Korea, and Australia now trade more with China than with America. The goal: collapse export-driven industries while raising domestic costs, creating economic desperation. Number 3, destabilize the financial system. Trump is undermining the foundations of the US dollar, which underpins the entire global economy. Publicly attacking and threatening to replace Fed officials destroys market confidence. Businesses can't plan or borrow when they fear politically driven interest rates. Trump has openly suggested renegotiating or defaulting on US debt, a move that would send global markets into chaos. And as US reserve currency status weakens, inflation will skyrocket and retirement savings will evaporate. Given tax cuts for billionaires and corporations with no offset will balloon the national debt and raise borrowing costs. Goal? Trigger financial panic, erode trust in the dollar, and push global investors to abandon the US. Step 4. Weaken the core institutions. Strong economies require stable, predictable institutions, and Trump is actively dismantling them in the US. And he's turning courts and regulators into partisan tools, which scares investors and discourages entrepreneurship. Businesses need neutral enforcement of contracts to function. Trump destroys that trust. Slashing budgets and hollowing out expertise in the Department of Commerce, in the State Department, and regulatory agencies, the US has become incapable of coordinating trade policy or negotiating deals, leaving foreign rivals with the upper hand. The goal? Turn government into an unreliable, unpredictable force, discouraging growth and making citizens dependent on Trump for stability. And the final step, consolidating wealth and power for himself. Once the system collapses, Trump and his allies seize control of what's left. As farms, factories, and businesses fail, Trump-aligned billionaires buy them at dollars on the penny, just like Russian oligarchs after the Soviet collapse. Trump deregulates industries for corporations while leaving consumers unprotected, maximizing profits for his allies. With ordinary Americans broke and scared, they accept authoritarian control in exchange for the illusion of order. The ultra-rich rule as oligarchs with Trump as the figurehead. His goal? Create a Russian-style oligarchy where wealth and power are concentrated among a handful of loyal insiders. Individually, these actions look like bad policies or political incompetence, but together they form a clear pattern of economic sabotage. Shrink the labor force so industries collapse, cut off international trade to isolate the US and destroy exports, destabilize the financial system to trigger a panic, weaken core institutions so no one can resist, consolidate wealth and power into the hands of Trump and his allies. This is the blueprint for authoritarian takeover. And quite quickly, America won't have a democracy. It will have a playground for oligarchs. And what are Americans doing about this? Tell me, because I don't know.
Okay, so let's run through the 4 new tariffs that are going to kick off next Wednesday. We have a 100% tariff on all imported pharmaceuticals, a 50% tariff on kitchen cabinets and bathroom vanities, 30% on upholstered furniture, and a 25% on heavy-duty trucks. I know we're not driving big rigs, but that is how your groceries get to the grocery store. So if the costs for those go up, it could trickle down to your groceries. Now, the most significant one on that list, of course, is the drugs. Over $230 billion of imported drugs came into the U.S. last year. And remember, when this was first floated, a lot of the industry said, hey, this could mean higher prices for Americans, reduced access to some of your medications, and potentially higher insurance costs. Now, what I do want to caveat is this announcement says that any drug company that has broken ground or is in construction on new manufacturing facilities in the U.S., they are exempt from that tariff. So companies like Eli Lilly, Johnson & Johnson, some of those big drug makers, have already committed to tens of billions of dollars, so they would be exempt in this case. So that's something to watch there. The upholstered furniture, the bathroom vanities, I know my mom's watching this. She's going, I'm doing my home renovations. This could mean higher prices, and especially for those low-income and middle-income consumers that are importing that cheaper furniture from China and India, it could be a concern.
And then if people aren't redoing those bathrooms and kitchens and they're not hiring contractors and carpenters and plumbers, it could wash through the economy.
So I'm really sorry to be delivering more bad news. I really am. Every time this administration does something to distract the world, like the latest being this Tylenol joke, something else is happening they don't want us to know. And the research from Money Talk News, the economists from Money Talk News have just released their very dire economic data. So Doge laid off 287,000 people. Okay. American companies have already in 2025 announced 744,308 job layoffs. Okay. Just in the first half of 2025, these are the highest layoffs since the pandemic. Major sectors hit include retail, technology, media, and nonprofits. Overall, there's been a 220% jump in layoffs compared to this time last year. While the unemployment rate is at 4.2%, considered low, the number underneath that is disturbing, because 34%, a record-breaking 34% of those employed today are considered functionally unemployed, meaning they are working for poverty wages and SHIT benefits. Highest number in the history of the United States. So that unemployment number that the administration is boasting about, low employment numbers, don't let them gaslight you. And more bad news. They are expecting 480,000 more Americans to lose their jobs by the end of this year. And folks, there's only like 3.5 more months left. Tariffs are estimated to cost the average family, now that they're all really kicking in, a net income loss of $2,300 by the end of this year, as tariffs hit their highest since 1935. Additionally, things like leather goods and shoes and handbags are expected to see a rise in price of 37% because of the tariffs, clothing 35%, vehicles 12%, or roughly $5,000 per new car, and metal goods are expected to increase by 36%. Low-income families will be bearing the brunt of all of this, as their disposable income is virtually going to disappear under the Trump administration's Trump session. And MAGA, that's a lot of you folks. Now, I want you guys to keep all of that in the context. All these layoffs, families who have family members that are not bringing in an income and can't find a job, because the new job creation under the Trump administration is some of the lowest ever. In addition, they're going to be hit with these higher costs. In addition, once the big, beautiful bill portion kicks in, where you have to be employed to get Medicaid, but people can't find jobs to get that Medicaid coverage. So we have that to look forward to in the next upcoming months. This is fucking horrible. You know, I guess the only people that aren't going to be affected by this are the ones that are going to be raptured tomorrow. Yeah, the Trump supporters that are going to be raptured tomorrow. They're the only ones skating free out of all of this. Anyway.
6% unemployment in some states, including Washington, D.C., which is the highest. The average is 4.3%. Inflation rose to 2.9%. Foreclosures for homes are up 18% higher than last year. Auto repossessions are skyrocketing. Farmers are begging for help. In Detroit this week, a manufacturer announced that they would quash a $50 million deal that took 3 years. Subaru is pulling out of the United States of America. Marvel is pulling out of the United States of America. The South Korean Hyundai plant was raided. That would have brought $21 billion to the state of Georgia. Thousands of jobs. We have lost over 1 million jobs in less than 9 months in 2025. Vegetables are up 38%. We now pay a tariff, a tax, anywhere from 10 to 147%. Tariffs are taxes that the U.S. importer pays and passes on to you, the consumer. Every single country has stopped doing business with the United States of America. We are spending $1 trillion on the Department of War, $250 billion on deporting brown people who actually pay taxes and also contribute to the gross domestic product. Are we great yet?
They're getting warnings now. It would be $1 billion impact every week that the government is shut down. That's according to Tourism Economics. $1 billion in losses because of disruptions in air travel or train trips, because national parks and museums would likely close. We certainly have seen that happen in past shutdowns. U.S. Travel, which is the trade group representing the industry, sent a letter to congressional leaders calling a shutdown a wholly preventable blow to America's travel economy. Quote, the longer a shutdown drags on, the more likely we are to see longer TSA lines, flight delays and cancellations, national parks in disrepair, and unnecessary delays in modernizing travel infrastructure. There's a lot of those projects going on. This was according to CEO Jeff Freeman in a news release. They're pointing to an Ipsos survey that showed 60% of Americans say they would cancel or avoid trips by air in the event of a shutdown. But look, the travel industry has already seen softer demand in the second quarter through summer's end. International travel is noticeably off, especially from Canada. Hotel executives publicly have grappled with shrinking government business because jobs were slashed earlier this year. There were fewer government people traveling, staying at hotels. If you have whole departments shuttered and federal workers furloughed, that most certainly would hit the travel industry, not just hotels, but restaurants that cater then to government workers who go to conferences and things like that. So it has a ripple effect beyond just TSA lines, so to speak.
America is going to be the poorest country in the world starting now. You're going to see the biggest crashes happening right now. So that's good for me because the price of gold and silver go up.
That's interesting because most people in India until the last decade have been migrating to the US, thinking that that is where is the land of opportunity to pursue the great American dream. But over the last 2 years, we've seen an increasing number of people coming back in droves back to India because that's where they're seeing the opportunity. So that is a very interesting shift that I never thought would happen so quickly in my lifetime.
We are struggling domestically here, economically, and we cannot afford to continuously give money to cause harm to the rest of the world when we're not addressing the harm that our people are experiencing here in this country.
Your criticism of Israel, some people say, oh, she's anti-Semitic. Are you an anti-Semite?
Absolutely not. I don't talk about anything that has to do with Jewish persons or Jewish people. Like, my problem is with the Israeli government and the way in which the occupation, the Nakba, the apartheid, the genocide, like those are what I take issues with, because those are things I understand. And those are things that should not exist with the help of the United States. The United States should be the ones who are fighting against those kind of things. And that is what I object to. I don't have a problem with Jewish people.
Okay, so here's the number that we all need to know. Every week the government shut down, the economy loses about $7 billion. Now that's not Washington's money, that's your money. That's your jobs. That's your services on the line. And while the economy bleeds, President Trump is preparing mass layoffs, not just furloughs. That means hundreds of thousands of federal workers could lose not only their paychecks, but their jobs. This isn't a budget dispute anymore. This is a power play. So here's what Democrats should demand if they want to fight back for the people. One is to protect healthcare, because without extending ACA premium credits, millions of families will see their health insurance skyrocket overnight. Number two would be protect workers. Trump wants to turn the temporary shutdown into permanent firings. Democrats must guarantee no layoffs, period. Number three, keep essential services running. TSA, FDA inspections, disaster relief, flood insurance. These can't be bargaining chips. Number four, put guardrails on presidential power. Right now, Trump gets to pick and choose what stays open. That's too much power in one man's hands. Congress must set limits. Number five, they need to guarantee worker relief. Back pay is too little too late. Workers need emergency funds to cover rent, groceries, and bills during this shutdown. And lastly, number six, in this hostage game once and for all, pass a rule that if Congress can't agree, the government automatically keeps running for 90 days. No more shutdowns as a weapon. Family, every one of these demands ties back to one principle. The government should serve the people, not the president's agenda. So I'll leave you with this. If $7 billion a week could vanish just because of politics, ask yourself, who's really paying the price for this shutdown?
There is a 93% chance that the United States will be heading into recession within 12 months, at least according to UBS, the United Bank of Switzerland. Now, there is ample data supporting this conclusion, but there is a bit of a twist to this, if you bear with me. Now, it's true that prices are rising rapidly. Again, you could see overall inflation has increased from 2.3% to 2.9% since the beginning of 2025. So, yeah, that's a problem. Now, it's supposed to happen when inflation starts creeping back up. Dollars are supposed to get cheaper, and while it was trending down, it looks like for the past couple of weeks, it's been shooting up. You do not want dollars to get more expensive along with prices going in the same direction. That's a great way to bankrupt a lot of people. And yes, bankruptcies are a good sign of a recession, but we can see here, no, bankruptcies may have been rising from 2022, but since 2025, they've been flat or even dropping. So, okay, maybe bankruptcies don't show us that we're in a recession. That's good. And if you take a look at the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, or the NASDAQ, they have all been trending up consistently. So the markets aren't reflecting any kind of recession either. But of course, the markets don't accurately reflect the entirety of the US economy. In fact, the broadest measure for the US economy is looking at our GDP, the gross domestic product. And when they have 2 consecutive periods of GDP contracting, you can officially say that we are in a recession. But the GDP has risen to 3.8% for the second quarter, and that's about 0.8% higher than previously written. So the economy did even better than people thought. But the flaw with measuring GDP is imports are written in as a negative, and it's true. Our imports dropped significantly, so that meant there was less of a negative number to include in this GDP. But against all odds, consumer spending actually went up in August by 0.6%. But here is the crazy twist. Even if the GDP looks like it's growing or if it's dropping, it's not as relevant as watching the unemployment rate. If you have a rising GDP, but also a rising unemployment rate, guess what? The economy's not doing so hot. But it also works in the reverse. You see, the first 2 quarters of the year 2022 saw negative GDP growth. So technically we were in a recession, but there was a caveat. Even though our imports were rising and our exports dropped, that meant the overall world economy was doing poorly. But internally, the United States was doing very well. We actually saw a great deal of job growth, a rise in consumer spending, and a robustness that we didn't really anticipate. So we weren't really in a recession. Unemployment actually was at 3.8% in the first quarter of 2022, and then it dropped to 3.6% in the second quarter. So that recession was ruled out. And you may be a little confused going, hey, Gio Husart, we just saw a GDP growth of 3.8%, but unemployment at 4.3%. So I guess we're doing really poorly for 2025. But there is a revision, and here's the twist. That huge jump to unemployment, 4.3%, actually begun in March of 2024. And the only reason why we're finding out today, or at least a few weeks ago, is it takes a very long time to actually measure unemployment. So when the Bureau of Labor Statistics gives their first estimate for unemployment, it really is just that. It's an estimate. They take a bunch of samples and they're relying on previous trends. They're not factoring in changes in trends like what was happening in 2024. The trend towards unemployment was actually going up. And that's why in September 9th of this year, job growth was revised down by 911,000 jobs from March of 2024 to March of this year. Meaning that unemployment isn't this administration's fault. But if unemployment keeps increasing, yeah, it's absolutely this administration's fault. But if unemployment drops, this administration also gets the credit, whether you like it or not. So this whole 93% recession probability, I really am not giving it all that much credit, especially because it's from UBS. Switzerland has a bunch of its own banking problems, especially with the Credit Suisse collapse that happened a couple years ago, that is still impacting the overall Swiss economy. Switzerland lost most of its prestige of being that one great banking center. Now it's more likely that Singapore is that place. And I haven't heard any predictions of a recession from the Bank of Singapore, so let's not hold our breath just yet. I also want to make a correction to a post I made on September 6th, about 3 or 4 days before we got the jobs revision data, where I said the US economy wasn't looking very good because of the high unemployment figure. Well, that's corrected now because of the 911,000 job correction. It makes it look less likely that we are inevitably heading towards a recession. I said less likely, not impossible, because nobody knows the future. Speaking of nobody knowing the future, I spoke with economist Christopher Clark about whether or not we would have an inevitable recession in the beginning of 2025, and he said it wasn't very likely. He suggested that maybe we would just have an economic slowdown and maybe a mild recession, and so far, he's 100% on the money. I am the Geo Husar. Let me know what makes you think whether or not we are in a recession. Thanks for watching.
I think Trump will take advantage of any shutdown. He's going to slim the government down. Does Trump have Schumer trapped?
Well, I think Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have trapped themselves. Look, the objective fact is, and we just did a poll, America's New Majority Project, I wrote about it in the New York Sun yesterday. The country does not want the government shut down, and the country does not want spending to increase. So if you have Democrats saying, I'm going to shut the government down unless you spend billions more, they're on the wrong side of both of those issues. And I don't quite know how Schumer and Jeffries allowed this to happen. But basically, Trump has maneuvered them to a point where they're giving him the opportunity, and Russ Vought has been preparing for this for the last 4 years at the America First Policy Institute and at his own shop. I mean, he knows what he's doing. And they're giving Trump the excuse to begin to shrink large parts of the federal government at a speed you would never get in a normal environment. So, and frankly, this is going to affect the governor's race in Virginia, where there are a huge number of federal employees. It's going to affect the governor's race in New Jersey. If these Democratic senators vote to close the government, they're voting to lay off the federal employees. This is going to be bad for the Democrats in both states.
And the longer it goes on, the longer Schumer fails to come to some kind of compromise or cave, the worse it gets for government employees, because Trump's going to go down the line, down the list, chopping whatever he wants. The longer it goes on, the worse it gets for Schumer.
Look, this is not complicated. President Trump ran to have a smaller government. He was elected, and the Senate and House Republicans were elected to have a smaller government. Now, the Democrats, by closing the government, are going to give the president the excuse to decide selectively. You know, in Washington, they'll have this like a snowstorm, and they'll say only essential personnel need to show up. I've always thought, you know, if you're not essential, why are we paying you? And so you're going to have this test that basically says, if you can't prove you're essential, you need to go find a private sector job.
It's brutal, isn't it? Newt, I want to talk about New Jersey. I live there. New Jersey Democrat gubernatorial candidate Mikey Sherrill was blocked from attending her Naval Academy graduation ceremony. That was back in 1994. She was blocked because of her alleged involvement in a cheating scandal. Meanwhile, new reports show she's made millions of dollars trading stocks while she was in Congress. Add it up, Newt. Does the Republican candidate, Jack Ciattarelli, does he have a real shot at winning in blue New Jersey?
Well, Jack has a real shot because, frankly, he almost won last time. And if the Republicans had believed how real that opportunity was, just a small number of additional resources, he would have been governor last time. New Jersey's had terribly high property taxes. They've had all sorts of problems with corruption. The idea that you're going to elect somebody who made millions while they were in Congress and who couldn't graduate because she had been involved in a cheating scandal, is this really what you want in Trenton? And I think, given what was just reported, and Gallup had the same report, the Democrats are at the lowest point of favorability in modern polling, and it's going to keep getting worse. And if they run people who are cheaters and who are willing to close the government, I just think that they're going straight into a decade of really being in the wilderness.
President Trump has firmly backed Jack Ciattarelli. Does a Trump endorsement help in New Jersey?
Trump endorsement helps because it turns out the base in New Jersey, and in an off-year election like this, if the Republican base votes, they're going to win. And again, Jack Ciattarelli came very close last time, and I think the president realizes that both in Virginia, where the Democrat nominee Spanberger has got to get the 2 Democratic senators to vote to keep the government over.
The American empire is over. We're done. We peaked about 12, 15 years ago, and we are on a down. And it's very hard for the American people, which I understand. I am one. It's hard to get your head around that. We've had a century of on the way up, which is a lot more fun than on the way down. But it does happen to every empire. We're only the latest. Look at the British, how far they've fallen. We're in that process. So the problem with the trickle down is, yeah, there might be more jobs, but they're going to be created in China. They're going to be created in Brazil. They're going to be created in India. They're not created here. We have the greatest level of corporate debt this country has ever seen, off the chart. The greatest level of personal debt, and we have the greatest level of government debt. Our government debt is now trillions of dollars greater than our annual output. That was not the case in the 20th century. It is the case now. What you're seeing is desperation politics. The whole Trump phenomena ought to say to you, wait a minute, these jerky moves that are out of whack, right? In recent days, we have seen the decision of the Trump administration to kiss the war in Ukraine goodbye. We're not doing that no more because we can't afford it. We can't keep funding a war, which, by the way, the West is losing, as anybody who pays attention knows. All of these things are signs of what? Of a country that is in trouble and is turning on its friends because it can to save itself. We're going to take over, we're going to get your energy for nothing. We're going to, make you build the wall, Hugh, in Mexico. Look what the genius in a way of Mr. Trump is that without understanding it, because clearly he doesn't, he feels in his own way, the way lots of people do, that there's something that necessitates going way beyond what has been done because our need as a society is beginning to show up. Look, let me give you a simple example. The best electric vehicles in the world right now, but by uniform global agreement, are produced by something called the BYD Corporation, which probably most folks have never heard of, which is Chinese. BYD, the initials, BYD. They make the best quality, cheapest electric car and truck. All right. You don't see them anywhere in the United States. Why not? Because Mr. Trump put a 27% tariff on them, and Mr. Biden raised it to 100%. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to buy a $30,000 BYD electric vehicle, which you could do, that's what they charge. That's why it's so good. You would have to pay $30,000 to get the Chinese to ship it here. Then you'd have to give another $30,000, 100%, tariff to Uncle Sam, or in this case, Uncle Don, in the way of a tariff. So it would cost you $60,000, which you're not going to do because you can get a less good Tesla or GM or Ford or anybody else at $40,000 to $50,000, which is less than you'd have to pay. But here's the problem.
I was going to say, because right now this sounds like a good plan to a lot of people. Trump has said, I'm going to do this not just to China, although he's going to double existing tariffs to China, obviously, right. But Mexico, Canada, everybody. If we intensify the tariffs, the scenario you just painted will happen, and people will be forced to buy U.S. stuff.
Right.
Which then creates U.S. jobs, which again stimulates the economy.
All right, let me be the economist. Okay, that's good for the Tesla company, which I'm sure is purely coincidental, and GM and Ford and the others. Good. And they'll maybe be able to hold on to some jobs. Good. But now let's follow the bouncing ball, because that's my job as an economist. Yeah. Everywhere else in the world, every company in Asia, Africa, Latin America that competes with an American company that has to buy a truck as part of its business will go to China and buy the best truck at the lowest price, $30,000, the best truck. No American company that competes with them will do that. And you know what that means? Those companies will be able to charge a lower price because they have better inputs than the American company, which doesn't. In the long run, that will lose Americans' jobs left and right as they're outcompeted by all the rest of the world that can go and buy and is buying BYD trucks. If you go to Europe right now and you go on the auto routes all over Europe, you'll see BYD cars and trucks. America is shooting itself in the foot. It may be great politics for Mr. Trump. I'm helping the auto companies and the workers. He'll go to Michigan and give us... Yeah, but what you're doing is diminishing the capability of the United States to hold on at a time when its footprint in the world is shrinking. If you take the United States together with the other G7 countries, that used to be the dominant bloc of the world, right? The United States, let's just enumerate them so everybody knows. Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, and Britain, okay? The G7, and I'm going to add up all the GDP, gross domestic product, total output of goods and services of all of those 7 countries, U.S. and its major allies. And now I'm going to compare it to the gross added up GDPs of China and its allies, known now as the BRICS. Okay, you add up the United States, about 28% of world output. You add up China and the BRICS, it's 35% of the world output. We aren't the wealthiest bloc in the world. We're number 2. And that's new. And that changes everything. Every country in Asia, Africa, Latin America, trying to figure out who to go to borrow money from, who to go to cut a deal with, who to go to sell your exports, who to go to invest in your railroads. You know where they used to go? Washington, London, Paris, of course. Now they go there.
But they go to India and Brazil.
That's right. They go to Sao Paulo, New Delhi, Beijing, and they ask, can you give us a better deal? And here's the news I got to give you. They get the better deals. And they go that way. And that's not going to stop. And you can rattle your sabers all over you put the 7th Fleet in the South China Sea. Isn't going to change that. You've got to come to terms with that, but we are led by people who don't want to do that because nobody wants to be the politician who has to explain to the people it's over.
Mr. President, the American people, slowly but surely, are catching on. No matter what their political view may be, Democrat, Republican, Independent, they understand that our current economic system is rigged. They understand that the very richest people in this country are becoming much richer, while 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and millions of people are trying to survive on starvation wages. The American people understand that while billionaires are getting huge tax breaks, they are finding it harder and harder to afford health care, to pay the rent or their mortgages, to afford child care, to be able to send their kids to college, to pay for the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe, or to buy decent quality food for their kids. The American people understand, painfully and depressingly, that unless we change the way the economy functions, their kids will likely have a lower standard of living than they do. In the richest country in the history of the world, it is likely that the younger generation will have a lower standard of living than their parents, while almost all new income and wealth goes to the people on the top.
So there's a pretty good financial indicator out there called the used car market. And the used car market is a good financial indicator of how your country is doing because it means that people have liquid capital. If you have liquid capital, you can buy a used car cash because most used car sales are going to be cash purchases. So if used cars are selling well, probably doing pretty good. People have liquid capital. They're able to buy whatever they want. They don't feel stressed about the future.
they're buying and selling things at leisure. If the used car market is bad, then people do not have liquid capital. They do not feel secure about the future, and they're hoarding whatever liquid capital that they do have. And right now, the used car market is tanked. It's tanked. No one is buying or selling anything, especially the cash purchases. So, not a very good indicator for us as a country or our economy. Either people have no money to spend, or they are incredibly insecure about their future. And either way is not good. So we're going to see how this plays out in the coming months. But I don't see that trend ending anytime soon.
We just learned that the U.S. erased nearly 1 million jobs from its books in the biggest negative revision ever. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said it overstated 911,000 jobs from April 24 to March 25. That is the biggest preliminary downgrade in history and worse than what happened after the 2008 financial crisis. But this is not just some one-off mistake. It's the third year in a row of an unusually large downward revision. Over 2 million jobs have now been wiped out after the fact. This means the labor market, which we already knew was slowing down, is even weaker than anyone thought. And we also know that the slowdown started far before President Trump's tariffs or immigration policies kicked in. The timing of this is wild because we are getting the awful data just a month after the president fired the head of the BLS. This is also more evidence that the Federal Reserve has kept interest rates too high for too long, and markets are now opening the door for a potential jumbo-sized rate cut this month.
The United States is about to break, and nobody is willing to talk about it. If we as a country don't make a change here, we are cooked. The media doesn't give it the attention it deserves. Politicians won't say it out loud. But our country, it's drowning in over $36 trillion in debt. And here's the terrifying part. We're now spending more than $1 trillion a year just to pay the interest. Not the debt itself, just the interest. It takes my breath away whenever I talk about it. Imagine you maxed out your credit card that you have, then took out more just to cover your monthly payments. That's what we're doing as a government and as a country. And when the bill comes due, it's you who's going to pay the price. Higher taxes, slash services, or worse, God forbid, a financial collapse that would make 2008 look like a hiccup. If we don't change course here, folks, if we don't stop printing money,
we're already in a recession and you need to start preparing. I have some ideas. Who am I and what do I know? I lived through the last recession, and not only did I live through it, but I thrived. I'm going to give you some of my tips. These are things you can realistically do no matter how much money you make, and you can do them starting today or this week to get prepared because it's going to get fucking worse. You'll hear everybody out there telling you you need to save, which I know is nearly impossible for some people. So I'm going to tell you something else. Stop paying the bills you don't have to. That's right. You officially have permission. You got a medical bill you've been trying to pay down that has virtually no interest on it or no interest. Pay them $5 so you don't get sent to collection. Pay them $2. When they call and harass you, say, please stop. Here is my payment arrangement. That is that. Do not pay them extra. The same go for those ungodly student loans. I enrolled in school, so I don't have to pay my student loans because fuck them. I'd rather get educated than pay them 10 times the amount that I borrowed. But if you can't do that, you only default after 270 days. Pay them every 200 fucking days. Do not pay them the full amount. Stop right now paying anything extra that you don't have to, that's not going to hurt you, and put that money into whatever savings or into paying down high interest things like credit cards. I know some of you are like, I already don't pay those fucking bills. Be sure, check your accounts carefully and make sure you are absolutely not paying anything you don't have to. Even your car payment can sometimes get skipped once in a while. Now that might hurt you in interest or in other ways, but they're not going to take the car back on 1 month missed payment for most of us. So if you need to skip those and put something in a savings so that if you lose your job or something happens, you have something, it might be a good idea to do that. And now is the time to consider doing that, because places will be less kind as the recession progresses about how they treat you regarding debt. Fuck them now.
If tariffs stay where they are now or get any worse, I predict the economy will collapse within a year. And I have a few reasons to back this up. The first is the wealthy are propping up the economy and the stock market right now, as it's been found that over 49% of spending in Q2 is because of consumers who are in the top 10% of income. Meaning, if you make more than $190,000 a year, you are a load-bearing weight on this economy right now, and it's equivalent to 2020 spending. That is thank you to Nick Roboto, who made a video on that topic. Second, property investments are supposed to be considered the safer of some options because they're always supposed to appreciate. Not only do we have more sellers than buyers, as you can see by the major gap, but we also have people searching for help with mortgage. This was 2008, 2009. That was COVID 2020. That in the corner is us. And to top it all off, as of July, the US dollar has decreased in value by 10%. Your dollar is worth 90 cents now. And Morgan Stanley is estimating that by the end of 2026, it will decrease by another 10%, which I think is very gracious of them because I think it's going to happen much, much sooner. And where the tariffs come into play here is they are objectively making things more expensive. They are objectively squeezing out more people who are no longer able to afford things. And the moment the people who are propping the economy up right now start to not want to spend money, we enter the danger zone. We enter the collapse. If this continues in the way that it is going, they have no other option other than to cannibalize each other and monopolize so that they can squeeze out more people and continue to show profits and maintain this house of cards.
So apparently the U.S. economy is being held up by just 20% of Americans, and that's a problem. Let's talk about it. So according to a recent report on CNN, the wealthiest households in this country are doing majority of the spending, okay? While the other 80% of households are conserving funds and not spending enough to move the financial needle. Now, in the same article, it is important to note that consumer spending makes up 70% of our economy. So if only a fraction or a small number or percentage of Americans feel comfortable spending money while the majority are only just spending enough to cover bills, that makes for a very shaky economy. So if you're hearing reports that the economy is booming, know that is due to large part of the economy being propped up by that 20% of wealthy household who has the ability to do the spending. So for those of you in the 80%, here's the takeaway, okay? Continue to do what you've been doing, all right? Meaning to make sure that you are conserving funds. This is not the time to ball out and be reckless with your spending. It is important now more than ever to build a strong safety net. And you can do that in a couple of different ways. The first thing, and one thing that you will always hear me talking about on this page, is the importance of having multiple streams of income, okay? That is even important in good times. If something dries up, if one of those streams dries up, you can pivot and do something else, okay? So making sure that you have your main hustle, your side hustle. Heck, you may need to have a side hustle to the side hustle. The second thing that you can do is making sure that you are saving your money, saving and investing. But the very first thing is you need to make sure that you have an emergency fund set up before you can even think about saving. And while you're having those multiple streams of income, a smart move to make would be to dedicate one or two of those side hustle checks just to, one could be for your savings account and one could be for your investment account. And the last thing you can do is to tackle your debt, okay? Avoid debt like the plague, okay? Meaning that work very hard to eliminate all debt or to keep it at a minimum. Now is not the time to be making sure that you're racking up a whole lot of debt. Now is not the time to do that. You need to make sure that you have a plan on how to eliminate debt. Now, as a reminder, you know that the Fed did lower interest rates by 0.25 percentage point yesterday. So give it a week or so, call your credit card companies and see if they would be willing to lower your interest rate. So get down in the comments and let me know, are you in the 20% that you are still spending money because this ain't nothing but a thing for you over here with what's going on in the economy? Or are you in the 80% where you are batting down the hatches and saving your funds? Let me know which group you fall into, okay? If you found any value in this post, please make sure to like as well as share it. And if you're not following the Black Death Society, what are you waiting for?
So the government's going to shut down on October 1st because the Republicans need 7 Democrats to vote to pass the budget bill, and they refuse. So this is all the Democrats' fault. Wait a second. Do you want to pay $7,000 more for your insurance a year? No, of course not. Oh, cool. So we agree that we do not want the Democrats to vote for this budget bill. Wait, what? Yeah, see, the reason the Democrats don't want to pass this bill is that it just extends funding and does nothing to fix anything. This big, beautiful bill is going to destroy healthcare access. So they're holding strong to restore those healthcare cuts. Not what Fox News said. Oh, not done yet. The Democrats even tried to meet with Trump to talk about it, and then he canceled the meeting. So tell me again, who's blocking progress? Probably just the art of the deal. I mean, do you want 15 million Americans to lose insurance? Like over 300 rural hospitals to close? 500,000 healthcare workers to lose their job? No. Not to mention everything that happens when the government shuts down. I mean, I don't know. I think we need food inspections. Republicans just want to save this country money. Yeah, the last shutdown cost us $11 billion. So now that you understand that, do you think maybe you could call your reps and tell them to give back the health care they stole from us? Oh, it feels so good. I know. We call that embracing reality. Welcome back.
In the event that you have the luxury of not being able to keep up with the state of the American economy, I apologize in advance, but I gotta be the one to put you on. If you want to remain ignorant, by all means, scroll. But after this portion of the video, it's all facts, baby. All facts. All right, getting straight into it, we're going to be discussing the recession indicators as of August 2025. All right, and the information that I'm going to be giving to you is coming from the Washington Post. The name of the article is Long-Term Unemployment at Post-Pandemic High, Straining Workers and Economy. So I took a decent amount of notes from this article, so excuse me in advance, apologies in advance if I'm looking down a lot, but let's just get straight into it, right? So as of August 2025, 1 out of every 4 worker in the United States is unemployed and has been unemployed for at least half a year, right? This is a number that economists say is only seen during periods of economic turmoil. The first indication is employers have frozen hiring because of all of these tariffs that are being imposed by the Trump administration, as well as these policies that are crippling businesses, American businesses. They have frozen hiring. They're trying to wait everything out. They're trying to see the final effects of all of these tariffs and these policies. The second indication is layoffs are rising. Weekly claims for unemployment benefits or insurance has reached its highest level since October 2021. All right. The third indicator is 1.9 million Americans have been unemployed for at least 27 weeks, right? This is the first time in 4 years that there are more unemployed people in the United States than there are jobs. Now, this is the 5th recession indication. The unemployment rate has exceeded 25%. It is officially at 25.7%. Now, this has only happened 3 times since 1950, and it has always happened after a recession. After, not before. The first time that this happened was for 1 month, June 1983, after an inflation-fueled recession. The second time was for an 8-year stretch following the 2009 Great Recession. And the third time was for 1 year and a half after the COVID-19 pandemic. All right. And now we're facing that again. Just to make it very clear, those of you who voted for this man to be elected, for him to be in office, you voted for an administration that has not only been imposing policies that has been crippling American businesses, but tariffs that have been crippling the American economy, to the point where there has not only been massive layoffs, but these American companies that are either struggling to keep their doors open or are so money hungry that where they want to keep their pockets full have frozen hiring. Okay, they have frozen hiring. For there to be more unemployed people than there are jobs available in this country, that says a lot. That's absolutely alarming. But remember, y'all voted for this. Y'all voted for this. All you red states, all you red people, all you MAGA people, y'all voted for this. Now, let me introduce another issue with all of this, right? Studies have found that workers who are unemployed long term are less likely to find jobs than others, right? Compared to others. And it's not because they don't want to find a job, okay? But understand, once you've become unemployed long term, you start to lose connections, you start to lose contact. Not only that, your skill set starts to be less valued, not because you haven't put in the work, because you haven't been working. So the growing field, and understand most fields are growing with each season, you're losing touch. You're not there. You're not present. So you're not able to keep up with the times. So when you are applying for jobs and they're asking for certain skill sets, you don't have it available because you don't have the experience. And God help you. God be with you if you are a younger worker or a recent graduate, a recent high school graduate or a recent college graduate, because you're going to have it harder than anybody else. You have it harder than anybody else. Considering just for entry-level jobs, they want you to have a minimum of 3 years experience. Good luck. Now I'm going to share with you some of the testimonies that have been submitted to this article that has been published by the Washington Post, okay? This is the first one. I have 15 plus years in IT. I thought I should be able to step in any job, said Steve Beal, 47 years old, who has been unemployed since March 2024. When he was laid off from a 6-figure job at Best Buy's corporate office in Minnesota. But so far, I've applied to at least 300 jobs, and it's all rejections. Even with referrals, networking, resume services, I haven't gotten anywhere. This is the next submission. Felicia Enriquez, a paralegal in Los Angeles, lost her job in July 2024. In the 14 months since, she's applied to hundreds of openings without any success. Local government jobs have dried up, makes sense considering all of these federal layoffs, and even temp agencies are coming up empty, she said. Her unemployment benefits, $400 a week, ran out in February, and she's 6 months behind rent. So far, Enriquez's landlord has been understanding, but she worries about what will happen to her and her 16-year-old daughter when that goodwill runs out. Already, she's relying on food stamps to buy groceries. She says it's getting harder the longer it gets. That's the vicious part. At the beginning, when you lose your job, you have money saved up, you have unemployment, things are okay. But when that runs out, then you really have to worry. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, the unemployment rate isn't skyrocketing. It isn't jumping to crazy numbers. However, the job market has frozen. It has completely frozen. It's at a standstill. It's stagnant, which is just as worse as if the unemployment rate was skyrocketing, because nobody's getting hired. If nobody's getting hired, no income is being made. It's not being generated. You understand? And we have an administration that's over here more worried about paying tribute to one individual than actually fixing the fucking state of the American economy. The American economy that's in the state that it's in because of all of these fucking policies and these tariffs. And that concludes your update on the state of the American economy as of August 2025. Do what you will with that information. And why I'm just now noticing that I went throughout this entire video without posting not one screenshot or any of my sources. So here is the screenshot of the head of the article. I don't know why the picture's not shrunken the way that I did, but fuck it, we ball. Anyway, you can see the title up top, so you can go and check for yourself. You could go and fact check for yourself. But the article is found on the Washington Post. Yeah.